So welcome everybody. Welcome to this panel on securing working from home. With COVID that's been going on for the last 18 months and this enforced working from home, we want to look now at what has happened after. What actually has now happened rather than what did we think was going to happen? How have people found working at home? Because this is different to working from home from the odd day. People have been having to work from home for extended periods of time. What worked? What didn't work? Were the dire predictions from a security perspective true? Did we suddenly have all of these issues that we were all predicting right at the beginning of the pandemic that were going to happen, or actual fact, have we managed to find this happy place where it all does seem to work and that people are effective no matter where they are? So I'm joined today by my special guests. I've got Jason Apel from NT-Ware, Brian Honan from BH Consulting, and Dr. Jessica Barker from Cygenta, who are going to be just talking to us today about what they've seen in the market, what they've seen potentially in their own companies, and what has worked and what has not worked. So, given all the predictions of doom, which I talked about at the beginning, when we went into this working from home, there were a lot of pundits and a lot of people talking about what was going to happen with suddenly all of these workers thrust into working from home, which was ironic given the fact that many of us in InfoSec and many of us in IT were already doing the odd bit working from home. But I think as one of my as Talarad on the Human Hacker podcast said yesterday, there was a big difference between working from home for the odd bit and working from home enforced permanently. So given all of this, what worked and what didn't work? Who wants to start off? Brian, I can see you about to start there.
Thanks, Quentyn. I think the pandemic did force many businesses, as you said, to move into a remote working model that many of them were not prepared for. I had one client who ironically was quite happy with the pandemic hitting because he had gone and bought a whole lot of wireless dongles for the desktop PCs they had in the office about 12 months before the pandemic to make the whole office wireless. And then his boss turned around and said, why are you going to spend time and money inserting those wireless dongles into desktop PCs that are already connected by wired cables? We don't need it. So as people left the office in March 2020 with their desktop under the one arm, he was able to give out his wireless dongle with the other with his other hand. So I suppose for him, the pandemic brought some good news for remote workers. But on a more serious note, there have been many challenges faced against SMEs. We're an expert advisor with the European Cybersecurity Agency, ENISA, and we helped them author a report on the impact of the pandemic on SMEs within the EU. And of all the quite a large number of the SMEs that were surveyed highlighted that they had suffered cybersecurity attacks as a result of the pandemic, and they also struggled to secure their remote workers. So, as you highlighted, Quentyn, you had, those of us working in cybersecurity or IT, we probably already used to work remotely because we have laptops, we have all that sort of stuff. But for many businesses, they didn't have that, and they had staff. As I said, like my client walking out the office with a desktop PC and a wireless dongle in one hand, but other companies had staff going home, probably logging in from their own personal devices, their own personal networks, and there's been many security challenges over that. So I don't think it hit the doom, oh my God, the cyber world is going to end, that many of the vendors tried to promote, but it did bring a lot of challenges, and it did bring a lot of issues that I think we can discuss later on in the conversation, because I'm conscious that I might be hogging up the chat here. But I suppose in short, it's brought some challenges, but I do think companies have adapted quite well.
Perfect, thank you. Jason or Jess, who wants to reply on that or give your own experiences?
I might just jump in with just a very quick comment, just to, I guess, and I'd very much like to hear, I guess, the human aspect of this from Jess, but I didn't see a huge amount of transitional problems for our business and for a lot of our customers. the points made by Brian are very true, that it's organizations that were desk-based that had to suddenly, how do we make these people work from home? How can we enable this? And I too saw companies with personal PCs trying to get people to start up terminal sessions and trying to deal with the how do I remotely manage your home IT now? Where previously it was always, well, that's your PC, that's your home, don't ask us questions about that. Now it's like, okay, let me figure out how to adapt your router or change these things. So that was a bit of a challenge. Didn't hit us the same way, and I think that that was, again, because we're very much a mobile office already, and for those sorts of companies, it actually just kind of was a transitional phase. It was more the people aspect that hit us, because it was like 1 day a week that turned into 4, and suddenly the luxury of being home. Now when the offices get open, it's like, oh my God, I can now go back to an office for a day, and it was the complete opposite. So I think that was more the human aspect. I think technology's saved us. If this happened many years ago, this would have been an absolute mess. On one side, we're kind of worried about the technology. At the same time, technology saved us. We went from a workforce that was in business attire and traveling all over the world on planes, and now they walk to meetings in their pajamas with a coffee in their hand and they sit in front of Teams. The same job got done. Everyone thought, oh, how is it going to impact productivity? Generally, people work more now. Again, there's a human aspect to that is actually dangerous. But at the same time, business continued. And when you talk to companies now, a lot of the ones, especially our customers and Canon customers, they're not showing us this doom and gloom picture. It's more, how can we actually now make this a better thing and move forward with it? So I don't see it as the doom and gloom that was predicted. But yeah, of course, as Brian said, there was definitely challenges.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, I'd like to correct something you said just then. It's not with the pajamas, it's with pajama bottoms on. From the upper half, you still have your shirt and your jacket on, but what's below the camera, no one needs to see.
It's 11 p.m. at night here in Australia, and that's why I'm sitting here quite calmly, so yes.
Don't stand up, Jason.
So Jess, from your perspective and what you saw with your customers, and also maybe from more the human aspect, because I know that's a huge conversation, I felt it very pertinently last year, that the lack of human contact, the lack of real human contact was affecting me. So Jess, from your side, what did you see?
Definitely. I think it's fantastic we're having this conversation now with the last 18, 20 months experience to be able to look back on. And yourself, Quentyn, Jason, Brian, all raised fantastic points. I think that it accelerated challenges for organizations. What I really saw was essentially a forced digital transformation for so many of our clients. They had plans to move people more and more working from home. They had plans to move to the cloud more and more, but they had those plans for maybe 2, 3, 5 years, and instead they had to do it in 2, 3, 5 days. So it certainly opened up challenges, and I think we saw that in the public domain. We saw some really high-profile attacks. For example, Finastra. I remember the CEO saying that the working from home element played a key role in the attack that they suffered in terms of the remote desktop protocol, and then also in terms of Twitter, the social engineering attack that they suffered, where the criminals were posing as individuals from Twitter's IT department, ringing people up because they were working from home now. So it certainly opened up the threat landscape. But from the human side, and with a sort of more positive perspective, what I certainly saw was suddenly people taking much more interest in cybersecurity. So I've been holding focus groups for all sorts of our different clients at Cygenta during the pandemic, talking to people in all different departments in the organizations we work with. And one of the key themes that comes through is that people feel more aware of cybersecurity. They're no longer in the workplace having that, to some extent, false sense of security, that they're protected by the perimeter, that it's all on the IT department, it's all on the InfoSec department. What I'm hearing from a lot of end users is that they're suddenly aware how close they are to technology. They're suddenly aware that they're bringing the workplace into the home, and even things like thinking about who else is in the house with them. Do they have roommates or spouses that work for a competitor? together and they're having calls and thinking about suddenly what they're talking about. They're maybe working by a window and they're realizing, oh, anybody walking by can see my screen. And there's that blurring of lines between home and workplace security. So I'm seeing people engage in cybersecurity more. I'm seeing much more appetite for information and for guidance. But I think we do have a bit of a cultural issue where people are potentially feeling more isolated. They don't have their colleagues to turn to for advice or to express their concerns. And of course, there is that more personal element where people are anxious. We've been dealing with a pandemic. We've been dealing with some really serious issues in terms of health, in terms of finances. And so that has an impact on people's morale, on their ability to work without feeling distracted or distressed.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else noticed it as well, but I think I quoted it last year saying I was living my life in half-hour chunks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because every meeting, when it's a remote meeting, was tending to be a half hour or multiples of half hour. And I remember coming into the office for the first time and having a quick catch up with our head of strategy. And he caught me at the coffee machine. We spoke for about 5 minutes at the coffee machine, and that was the end of the meeting, and wandered back to our desks. And it was like oh God, you can have a quick meeting that's 5 minutes.
Yeah, and academic research has been looking into the so-called Zoom fatigue. It's no longer just anecdotal. There are academics who have been researching it and finding that, of course, we are feeling more exhausted because it's a different way of communicating, and we don't get the same energy back from the people that we're speaking with when we're on a screen. Present company accepted, of course, but in general, we're speaking to a green dot, and we don't get the same feedback, and that has an impact in terms of how we feel at the end of the day.
Yes, I mean I'm talking to that camera there, but you're down there, and that's it's very hard to read the person. So we talked about some of the things that just didn't, which were the major challenges, and I liked the comment that was made about the forced digital transformation. In terms of the cybersecurity, the increase or the decrease, Jess, you were coming in very clearly about some of the people who lives with who and what kind of things are going on. For Brian and from Jason, from your point of view, did you see any changes to the risk profile specifically with certain companies?
Oh yeah, kind of. We saw particularly earlier on in the pandemic, we saw quite a number of security breaches. Excuse me, which were directly down to the forced digitalization that happened. We had, like many companies, struggled before the pandemic to put in multi-factor authentication, and then suddenly MFA became so important to put in place afterwards that we actually had one CEO of one of our clients say, to all the staff, if you don't enable MFA for your account, you no longer will have access to any systems, because that was on foot of several of their users having their accounts hijacked because they were reusing passwords, using simple passwords, etc. So we had other security incidents where companies were forced into remote working, hadn't fully thought it through, so had installed remote access solutions with the premise, just get it up and working, let's secure it later on. But while they did get it up and working, the let's secure it later on step didn't happen in time, and then it got exploited. We had several companies come to us that have been hit by ransomware, whereby they had left RDP exposed on the internet, or that their VPN hadn't been patched properly, or in another case where they used a remote IT management tool to enable people to, from their home PC, to connect to their desktop PC and to work off their desktop PC, but hadn't secured that solution, and the criminals were able to hack into their machines and take down the whole network with ransomware. So quite earlier on, we saw a lot of these type of attacks, and unfortunately, those companies learned the hard way that you have to put these things in. But we also, and coming back on Jessica's point there about more engagement in cybersecurity, I think what criminals did jump on the pandemic as a lure to try and trick people in with phishing emails or emails with malicious attachments, and that was not just coming to their corporate accounts, but also to their personal accounts, to their mobile phones. There were several major breaches over the past 18 months that have provided criminals with access to people's personal data, be their email addresses, mobile phones. So users were, as Jessica said, now in the big bad world, no longer protected by the corporate perimeter, and both at the personal and professional level were being targeted by criminals. And I think the more wiser companies, if I can put it that way, took advantage of that in their awareness training programs to try and sort of say, okay, let's forget about trying to teach you about our policies and all that stuff. Let's teach you how to spot a phishing email. Let's teach you how to spot a smishing text. Let's teach you how to identify if that attachment really is genuine or not. And obviously that would take over into the real world. So I think many companies have said earlier on face the challenge. I think we've now come to the stage, well, hopefully we're starting to come to the stage where the let's secure it later step is either has taken place or it's starting to take place now, and people are applying MFA to cloud accounts, are looking at the remote access solutions and securing them properly.
Perfect. And Jason, from your perspective, because of course I know that you work down in Australia. NT-Ware is headquartered in Bad Iburg in Germany. So you've got a lot of personal experience with working remotely in different time zones. But what was your experience, and what was the experience of the customers who were reaching out to you for support? Because one presumes running a Uniflow online, you're going to get a lot of support questions with people saying, well, what do I do now? I've got all these people now remote.
It's like for myself, as I said, we were very used to working from home, and I've only worked from home for 10 years. And I still found the pandemic a challenge, even saying that, because it did kind of, it brought it into being a very normal approach to things, where it used to be a unique. And I think with that, everybody started to find themselves in the same position that I took for granted. And suddenly you feel, how are we going to continue this work? How are we going to, gain access to these systems? One of the big things was VPN access. A lot of people were either underestimated what they needed, or they badly implemented what they had. So as an example, they would sit there going, you know what, I allow 1 day a week, my workers can work from home. I have a company of 100 people. So on average, there's going to be about probably 20 people at home across my organization. Okay, tomorrow you have 100. Why are people not being able to log in? Why can't people suddenly have access? It's like, okay, have you scoped a VPN solution that can actually now scale to 100 people, 24 hours a day, consistently, logging in? Even with personal experience, do we have a big enough IP scope for this? Did we give an IP range of, let's have 10 or 20 addresses and suddenly the whole company's trying to log in? Do we have the situation where people can log in securely through these systems? Because it was a one-off, and now it's become the only thing that they have. Do they have devices that can do this? And this is also not just the physical device, but Brian was talking about, I think Jess mentioned, like the people using their home PC. But when you force a person to home, they're suddenly looking at the other peripherals and devices that we take for granted in the office that suddenly become, okay, well, I have one at home. How am I going to use this? Can I, my home printer is connected to my home PC. So if I scan to that and then I share a folder off that, can I then link to that from my work PC and copy the file across? And as much as people will sit there and phone IT and say, oh, I have no idea how this works, it's incredible how ingenuitive people will become to get around a problem. And people, if you don't give them the help, if you don't give them the advice, and if they feel that IT is going, that's your problem, I only look after our laptop, they will very quickly work against you and introduce problems in the home whilst you're trying to secure your laptop, they're defeating you at the other end. You need to look at this holistically and go, okay, you are no longer having the privilege of working at home. It's the other way around. I now am the one saying, do you mind if I run my business from your house? And with that in mind, you need to look at this.
Yes.
You need to look at this and go, you know what, if I'm running my business in their house is also my responsibility. You know, I have to help them with their router questions if they're wondering, why can't I get the VPN out through my router? Is my ISP blocking UDP packets? All of these sorts of things suddenly come into play, and you need to go, you know what, if I bite them on this, they'll go, you know what, I'll just start downloading VPN clients until I find one that works.
And putting my core credentials in.
Exactly, where if I have a secure connection, take the time to work with them and go, let's find a solution to fix this. So these are some of the challenges that we saw. And certainly advice I gave to a lot of customers was you need to work with people that you have with what they have at home. You can't just turn around and say, okay, take everything at home, because that perimeter is now dissolved. You're now working in isolation. And essentially you need to treat every house like an airport lounge. Now, we don't trust them. The PCs are virus-ridden. No one wants to go near them, and you certainly wouldn't plug a USB key into it. But you need to treat every endpoint now in that particular light, because that is now the norm. You have to protect it.
So we've talked about some of the things that didn't work. What were the things that were unexpected wins from everyone working from home?
I wouldn't call it an unexpected win, but certainly a push in the right direction. And I think Jess may have made the point at the start of this conversation, but it forced a change that actually brought about some innovation within the business, and projects that were kind of planned for 3 or 6 or 12-month kind of stretches were now, let's do them now, because we had to move that protection to the endpoint. What was the good win out of this was that it did expose internal issues that we had become so entrenched in our perimeter security that you look at this and you go, I'm in the office, nothing can touch me, we've got this perimeter security. Mm-hmm. But you look at it and go, hang on, this perimeter security has been like this for years and years and years. We have a firewall, we have the proxy server, we have yada, yada, yada. And you get almost complacent with the security that you build up around yourself without completely checking these things on a regular basis. And nobody has the time to do end-to-end everything check. So when you suddenly move it out, you literally have to start from scratch. And what it was for us is that we're sitting going, well, the desktops, the endpoints are so secure. When they come back into the office, why would we change the profile so they go via the firewall and the proxy? Everything's now secured on the box. We can send these things straight out to the internet, and they actually have better security and access to our infrastructure with MFA, with cloud security, with all of the tools we've put in place, that they are now as secure at home as they are in the business. So for us, and for at least some of the customers I've spoken to, they got a kick in the pants to move things along, but it's certainly strengthened their overall position in the security landscape. So I certainly saw that as a positive, and I think the uptake within the user community has also been very positive from that, because as you said, we're now taking security to a personal level to their houses. So in training them about why we're suddenly ramping this up, because for the end user it was very confronting. You know, last year all you told us was there's a phishing campaign coming this quarter. And now all of a sudden there's a password manager, and this week MFA is now enforced, and now suddenly I've got this endpoint protection management suite, and now I've got a global proxy server. Why are you doing all this to me? And that, you know, it really comes down to training and explaining to them, these are the threats that you have in your house. And for a lot of them, it's about saying to them, these are your threats as well, on your home PC, on your home phone, on your home internet. And it's important that they understand that I'm not just trying to protect that box, that one connection. I'm trying to protect them, their identity, and the business that gives them an income. So I think there's a lot of positives that came out of this, because it forced a lot of organizations to reevaluate their position and look at where they are. And I think for a lot of them, they looked at it and thought, you know what, we're probably better off now in this pandemic than we were 12 months ago. And I would say in a lot of organizations, you would be strengthened now after the pandemic to be in a better position for a ransomware attack than maybe 24 months earlier, where you didn't have this in place.
I'd agree. And that probably makes your infrastructure in the office, when you go to renew it, are you going to renew all of the same security protective infrastructure?
Totally.
So Brian and Jess, do you want to come in on that, or?
Yeah, I think Jason's made some excellent points there. I think the benefit, if you like, the silver cloud of the pandemic from a business point of view has been how IT and cybersecurity have become a business risk much more so now than it did before the pandemic. I think businesses realize we need, we are really reliant on having good, secure IT facilities in place. If we don't have them in place, we are at a business disadvantage. And I think I've seen conversations change in the past 2 years from being, to coin the phrase, trying to get the boards of various clients or senior management to take cybersecurity seriously. It was like trying to push a rope up a hill. It was quite difficult. Now you're being invited into boardrooms. What do we need to do to keep cybersecurity secure? And I think that has been a combination of two things. One has been the pandemic and the impact that the business clearly has seen how reliant they are on having good, reliable IT infrastructure in place. And the other has been the rise in the ransomware attacks as well. So I think those two combined together have made many boards and many businesses take cybersecurity seriously as a business risk, not as an IT problem anymore.
Yeah, I've seen very much the same. I have done far more executive level awareness raising communications and training over the last 20 months than before. I think we were already moving that way, but it was moving slowly. And then what we've seen over the last almost couple of years is far more attention from the board. It's been easier. There has been less complacency, I think, in terms of communicating cybersecurity messages at that level and at the general organizational level as well. I think people, as I said earlier, are more aware and more open to cybersecurity messages because they are more understanding that it affects them at home and that they don't have that false sense of security, really, that they got thinking, oh, well, this is all just InfoSec's issue. They handle it for me when I'm in the workplace. And we found this actually with Club CISO. We do an annual report every year, an annual survey of members every year, and it happens to be in March. So in March 2020, we were due to have the in-person annual survey, and obviously COVID hit, lockdown hit, we had to move it to a virtual event. And a lot of that discussion centered around what do we think is going to happen? What are we worried about? And there was a lot of concern, a lot of apprehension over what was coming and how we were all going to manage it and how CISOs were going to deal with this for their organizations. Fast forward a year to March 2021, and the conversation was much more optimistic. There was a recognition that actually, although of course there were issues and challenges and incidents, most organizations had fared better than they had expected. And the response from people in organizations had become much more receptive to hearing cybersecurity messages, particularly ones that resonated on the personal level as well as the business level.
So kicking with that particular message, Jess, if I may just stay with yourself and then come back to Brian and Jason. Awareness is so important, and education is so important. And we also talked earlier on about how to train people to recognize a phishing email, how to recognize an SMS, a fake SMS. And we didn't see much coronavirus themed stuff, but we did see a huge amount of parcel delivery themed stuff over here. I don't know if that was thankfully the attackers really stayed away from coronavirus, but my God, your parcel's being delivered, you owe £1.49 on your parcel. That was huge. But Jess, how do you make that effective when people can't talk to each other and people are not having these coffee corner conversations? It's all through a screen.
Yeah, it's certainly different. I think, and this actually, if I continue with the theme of sort of Club CISO, our findings in March 2021, we asked the CISOs in our membership what had been most effective in terms of awareness raising for them. And number one really was communications centered on people's personal security, on helping people make their family more secure online. Because of course, what we had with the pandemic, not just was those of us working working from home more, but an increase in kids using gaming and adults, an increase in streaming, an increase in using all of the video platforms for personal communications, for going to parties and pub quizzes and weddings. And so actually the security messages at the personal level were seen as most effective. And then our members also reported really helpful having bite-sized communications. And this is something we found at Cygenta as well. People do not want death by PowerPoint in person, let alone over video. So actually giving people short, sharp security briefings, maybe a few minutes video, maybe a quick flyer, a virtual background with a couple of messages on, finding more innovative ways to give short messaging is really appreciated by people and far more effective than trying to get people to log in for a 1 hour session. There's also been lots of innovative responses like virtual escape rooms, more interactive and immersive learning that we've seen over the last sort of 20 months or so. And people seem quite receptive to that. And it can be really effective to mix up your messaging.
I now need to Google a virtual escape room. As my last experience with the real escape room was, we didn't escape. We would have been eaten by the zombies, unfortunately. So, Brian, how does that resonate with yourself? Are you seeing the same thing of how to get this message across and how to change people's perceptions and attitudes?
Yeah, I echo everything that Jess said. Is that, you know, even before the pandemic, people did not want to go into a lunch and learn session with a PowerPoint presentation and listen to somebody drone on about cybersecurity and then walk back out again and forget everything straight away. I think, as we've discussed, the amount of fake emails or phishing emails, fake emails, etc., that did target people actually did make them more aware themselves and more concerned. So they were more willing to be engaged in awareness training programs. We found some of the methods that we use with our clients to be quite effective would have been short, sharp presentations. As Jessica said, you know, don't sit them down for a half an hour PowerPoint presentation and don't focus on policies, focus on outcomes, focus on actions that you want. We created bite-sized videos that they could put up on their intranet that they could use. Ironically, one of our clients says, "Oh, that's great. I can send this around to and email this around to all our staff with a link in it for them to click on to get the phishing awareness training." And we're going, yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose. You send out an email, a link in it to say, don't click on links and emails, you know. So
would completion of the training be not clicking on the link and not watching the training?
Exactly.
That's a bit meta there. That's
it is, you know. But we also found the use of breakout rooms. So you know, where you would on your meeting platforms, be that Zoom, Teams, or whatever, you break people into groups and give them little challenges. You know, here's 5 emails. 3 of them, you know, how many of them are fake? How many of them are different? You know, so they can discuss. You try and get that interaction going as well. We also found using quizzes or crosswords and having prizes. It doesn't have to be a big prize, but that got engagement going as well. And with 2 of our clients, we found it very successful in introducing an awards program, because part of what you want to do in your awareness training is not just, if you like, for want of a better phrase, discourage the wrong behaviors, but you want to encourage the right behaviors. You want to encourage people reporting issues. So, you know, people would get virtual stickers for reporting a phishing email, and if you collected so many stickers, it's like a scout badge. You know, you get so many badges, you get a bigger badge to wear. You know, and it just created a bit of fun and an atmosphere. So, you know, it is difficult to do it by video because, yes, you might have 100 people or 50 people, or how many people on a virtual awareness session. You don't know how many of them really are really tuned in and have signed into the talk, and at the same time then are you know, doing their emails or finishing off that report they were meant to have done 2 hours ago. So by introducing the workshops, the breakout rooms, the quizzes, you kind of get that engagement because people are less likely then to be distracted as well, you know.
So Jason, how did you handle it? Obviously, your workforce is used to working remotely. So but you've got a huge workforce, I know, in Germany. So how did you handle all of this, the education and awareness?
Yeah, look, everything that's been said so far is vital. You need to send out information, whether it be emails with short, sharp information in it, whether it be just it could be an attachment, even just a short email with a news update, a security bulletin, something to raise people's awareness, not just what happens in the business, because you can kind of hammer it down their throats, you know, this happened in business, this happened in business, but there's enough that happens in the personal world that people can also look at that and see that, you know, it's not just the business. There's attacks happening in social media platforms. There's attacks happening on shopping infrastructure networks. So suddenly it brings a real, you know, this actually affects me. And that's the real human aspect to this. It's like, what's in it for me? You know, they walk into this thing and they go, okay, it's a breakfast seminar. So what's in it for me? Is a breakfast. That's about all they really want. And that's the only reason they turned up in the first place. So if you suddenly take this and go, okay, this is an article about MFA. This is now being, you know, enabled on Google. They're going to enforce this on Google. They all sit there and go, well, I use Google all the time, so I'm going to have to use MFA. So suddenly when I say I'm introducing this too, and we have to do it for these reasons in the business, they go, that makes perfect sense. It's in my personal life as well. So it's about kind of finding that balance between how can I find out what's in it for them. That was important. I think the other thing too, much like security, and we talk about layering security levels, you really need to layer how you communicate these things out. You can't just fire a shotgun out across your organization and say, I've captured everybody, so that should be it. My personal experience is that there are the go-to people in an organization where they are almost the confidence of the business. And these are the guys or girls that people will go to and go, did you see the email from, you know, the security officer? Did you see the email from the CEO? What does it all mean? And these are the go-to people that you need to first educate. It's your team leaders, it's the go-to people, it's those individuals in the organization that even though we're on teams, even though we're completely distributed across the planet, people will find ways to reach out to people they need to feel comfortable, because we all want to feel comfortable at the end of the day. So for me, it's about layering that security. You have to ensure that everybody is talking your message. So when you fire that gun across the business and they all panic and they go to their team leaders, they go to their confidence, they go to these people turn around and go, yes, look, great question. This is what I took out of the email and this is how I've handled it. And it means taking that time to do, IT, I call them IT transparency sessions, where I'm quite happy to open up. This is what we see in the back end. This is how we use the information we collect. This is what we see from our side. This is how we can control what we're doing. There's no smoke and mirrors here. There's no magic bubble. And there's certainly no kind of Uber IT firm that's watching your every move in the place. If you want to see what I see, let me know. I'll show you what I can see. And once they have that confidence, suddenly they go, okay, let's start listening a little bit more to what you have to say. So it's really about keeping that communication at a human level.
I would add to that, because I think Jason and Brian have made fantastic points. And in terms of having those people throughout the organization who might be the confidant, of course, you can build a champions network. And we've seen more and more organizations moving towards this model. We've supported many organizations over the last couple of years to build champion networks. And when you do it at the right time in the right way, it's a great way of scaling up your messaging and having those friendly, I like to call them the sort of friendly voice and ears of security, those influencers throughout the business that people might be more likely to turn to with security queries or concerns than trying to get to the InfoSec team. And that was true even when we were in the workplace, but particularly when people are working from home, they might not want to try and get hold of the InfoSec team. They might know that the InfoSec team is really busy, which is something we haven't kind of spoken much about in this conversation yet. But they might know that InfoSec's pretty overwhelmed, pretty burnt out. But actually, I can turn to Jason, I can turn to Brian. They're my security champions, and they're going to help me with this. Yeah. And they can also amplify some of the themes we've spoken about, the positivity, the fun side of security, the tailoring and the relevance of the messaging. Champions can really help you with all of those things that are so vital for getting true engagement from people.
What's this fun side of security you talk about, Jess? There's a fun side to what we do?
It does exist. Sometimes it can get lost, can't it?
Oh, yeah.
I want to kind of wrap up. We'll start to begin to wrap up with a question on sort of like three top tips. Now, obviously, I do apologise. Whoever goes first is going to get the short stick, and whoever goes last gets the even shorter stick because all the good ones have already been picked. So the sweet spot on this is to be in the middle. So I'm going to ask you for three top tips that you had, and of course you can do this with hindsight. Things that you would recommend anyone moving down this particular path to start to do. Things that maybe you'd wish you'd known at the beginning, where you went, well, that worked really well, and we'd obviously wish we'd done that, but that's what we would do now. Who wants to go first?
My three top tips are actually centered under one umbrella, and the umbrella really is to meet people where they are. So when it comes to security, whether it is working from home or not, the best approach is about making sure your guidance, your communications are tailored. They're relevant for the audience that you're speaking to. Otherwise, people will disengage. And that's been true during the pandemic more than ever. Focusing on the people and the sort of personal and family side of security is something that can really resonate with everybody. And it's going to get people to sit up and pay a bit more attention and develop that mindset that you really want. And making sure your communications, your awareness raising is positive. As Brian said earlier, actually thinking of rewarding people for good security rather than always looking at punishing them and saying no. They're my three top tips in terms of how to really focus on the people side of security, particularly when you're thinking about people working from home.
Actually, I fully agree on that. I was watching a movie last night, and they were looking for ways of motivating the troops. And one of the guys steps forward, to the political officer steps forward and says, "No, give them hope, give them heroes." And that sounds like what you're talking about here, which is motivate the people with the champion. So, Jason, I think you were sorry, Brian, you were a bit late to the party there. So, Jason, what would your top tips be?
I was being polite.
Thank you, Brian. Look, I think a couple of things kind of came out to us as we, especially as you said in hindsight, that would be really helpful. I guess the first one is having a clear communication plan across the business. We so quickly had to move to a technology like Teams, and for us, we were already a Teams house. Some organisations had to very quickly adapt to a technology, and very quickly you become so dependent on it. What happens if it's not there? Especially at the start, Microsoft was inundated with people jumping onto their platform. There was continual outages and things. Zoom had its challenges. Everybody had their challenges. I would say to anybody that's really looking at their remote worker approach, have a plan in place. How do I communicate to everybody? What happens if I need to contact them in an emergency, and how do I reach out to individuals? Do I go to team leaders? Do they have phone numbers that can call people? You need to make sure you can reach out to your people. And I think that's something that's vital. I think the second thing is the remoteness. And I think Jess made the point about how inundated IT is and the InfoSec teams are. Our previous answer to someone saying my laptop's broken is bring it on down, I'll have a look at it over lunch. And that's gone now. And especially when someone rings you up and says, look, I've got a pop-up on my screen that says I've got to invest X amount of Bitcoins in, otherwise I don't get my files back. And it would be as quick as, okay, just unplug it and bring it down to us. It's like, okay, but you're in a house in another country and you'll never get to the office. You must have a remote management plan. You need to be able to get access to these networks and systems. You need to be able to touch the endpoint, isolate the endpoint, quarantine it, and also be able to do mitigation on that endpoint without having to introduce other infrastructure. that is an absolutely vital requirement, because whilst they're in their house, they're still on a network, they're still on a VPN, and if they're not a risk to your network over the VPN, even if you manage to cut them off of the VPN, they are now at risk at the other stuff that's in their house that they've connected to the shared folder on their home PC to get files from. And now your issue is now infecting their personal life. And this is where it comes down to, they're allowing you to do your business in their house, and now your business has destroyed their home PC and family photos. So this is stuff you need to be very conscious of. How do I manage and do containment on an endpoint, I think is vital. I think the last point is really just awareness. The amount of times that you get bombarded by emails and the spam is one thing. Then you get bombarded by IT about, you have to secure, and on this side, we're here to attack you, we're here to attack you. People can very quickly and very easily become so paranoid about this that almost everything's a threat. You need to work with people to show them that these things, the controls you're putting in place are measured responses to the threat level. Because otherwise, the moment they panic, they again will go to a comment I made earlier, they'll pull back and work directly against you, thinking, okay, I don't see the risk out there, and IT is now watching everything that I do. And this can become a real risk, because then they start putting in holes and things to try and hide what they're doing. Now, if you're watching too closely, this looks like something that's happening incorrectly, and then you overly watch a person that is really just nervous in the first place. So you have to be very mindful of how people are, reacting to this situation, and measure your responses to what is actually happening and what the threat level really is.
That's a very, very good point. We were doing an executive awareness session yesterday, and I had to stop one of the demonstrations that we were doing and say, by the way, although this looks very, very scary, I will point out this is a very rare attack. We don't see many of these, so please don't have nightmares. I felt like the end of Crime Watch, trying to say, look, you're getting a bit of a potted history of all the bad stuff here. Not all of this is ever going to happen to one human being in their entire lifetime.
Exactly.
Brian, so obviously the last word, almost the last word, over to yourself.
Yeah, hindsight's 2020 vision, as they said. So if I could talk to, if November 2021 Brian could talk to March 2020 Brian, I'd have said invest in shares in Zoom and sell them in June in 2021. But from a cybersecurity point of view, I think maybe to round up the theme that both Jess and Jason have been doing, like Jess talked about people, Jason's talking there about IT. I think the focus we should have is move the focus as well onto data. Your data now is not where it was, where 20 months ago it may have been stored on a central file server. It's now in the cloud, or it's in somebody's Dropbox, or it's on somebody's personal device. So look at ways, how are you going to protect and secure that data? And that's echoing some of the stuff that Jason said there about having maybe mobile device management solutions in place, where you can maybe create a virtual environment on somebody's desktop computer or their home computer, so that if they copy information down from corporate data, it's contained within a virtual environment on that machine, and you're protected from their PC, and they're protected from your environment. Your data, as I said, is going to be in other areas like the cloud. Our people will be accessing data remotely. So look at ways, how are you going to secure that data? Multi-factor authentication. Put that in place. I think that's, if anything we've learned from the pandemic is that despite all the good work we do with awareness training, people still use weak passwords, or they reuse passwords across different platforms. And, as Jason said earlier on in the call, talk about, invest in enterprise password management system, a password manager, so that all staff can use it, but back that up with MFA. And then finally, I think, if you look at the people, process, technology, we've looked at people, we've talked about technology, but look at your processes. How do you, and it kind of echoes what Jason said there, about having tools to do remote support, but how do you do remote instant response? What are the issues you may face, not just from a technology point of view, but maybe from a legal or regulatory point of view. If your incident response plans have been developed and focused on you being located in your headquarters in the UK or Europe or Australia or wherever you may be, but now suddenly your staff are accessing it from all over the world, what laws do you have to comply with in your incident response? Now, it's not just your own local laws, it's probably where the staff member is located. And there's privacy laws that may have to be taken into account as well. How do you engage with law enforcement? How do you gather evidence in your remote environment? Or you've moved from having your data on a dedicated file server where you had full access to all the logs that you could investigate and your SIEM platform could look at it. Well, now it's in the cloud. Do you have the same access to the logs for investigative forensic purposes as well? So look at those areas as well. So my 3 tips: buy shares in technology. It looks like it's going to rocket because of how the world is changing. Focus on the data and look at your processes as well.
Perfect. No, I don't disagree. I think that's a perfect place to finish. So thank you to my special guests on this podcast, to Dr. Jessica Barker, to Jason Apel, and to Brian Honan. I've been Quentyn Taylor. We've been talking about how to secure the working from home model, and I hope from this you've taken some of the tips and some of the help and some of the areas, and if nothing else, you realize that you're probably not alone, that we all went through all of this, but now probably we're all in a much stronger place. I mean, a much stronger place business-wise or IT-wise to be able to support our business. So until next time, have a great time. Thank you very much.